do this. Okay, so hopefully this is going to go better than last time. Last time was fun, but we just didn't get recorded.
Yeah, it was fun. Yeah,
Yeah. So
it was really good.
yeah. Oh wow, yeah. I mean, people are never gonna get to hear that kind of conversation ever again. I'm not sure we can ever reach those
Yeah.
heights.
Mm.
Um, so hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of Chatter. Today I am here with Dr. Owen, a fantastic new YouTube channel that has appeared on stunningly YouTube, and possibly I think my oldest friend. Welcome to the show.
Yeah. I guess oldest. Yeah, fair enough. Okay, I'll take that. That writes off a few of our sort of people that we were friends with growing up. I like that. That puts me pole position now.
Yeah.
So that's really good. And yeah, as you alluded to, my YouTube channel is in fact on YouTube, so that's where you can find it, Dr. Owen.
Yeah, let me pull it up here for people so they can see it in all its majesty. It is actually very interesting, I have to say, aside from being yours, so therefore I'll watch it. You got loads of cool stuff, which we're going to get into now. So I guess my first question would be, how philosophical is lifting weights?
How philosophical is lifting weights? It's a good question. I think it can be as much or as little as you want it to be. In terms of, you don't need to overthink it. You can just go to the gym 3 times a week because that's what everyone else is doing, and not think about things, and you'll probably do all right by it. But probably if you're in there and committing a lot of your life to physical training, but also to sort of diet and other things around physical training, it gets to a point where it's enough of your life that you want to have some sort of philosophical basis for why you dedicate that much time and energy to it.
Definitely. What's your philosophy? Like, why? Because you've always been like, into sports and in shape and like into your fitness and going to the gym. Like, what is your raison d'etre for it?
That's a good question. I think for me, it's like always a balance of like the here and now, the hedonism of just like what's fun, what's going to be rewarding immediately, and then like what's good for me long term and in the future. And I think without overdoing it, without becoming sort of so full on with exercise that you reach a stage of addiction where you end up self-loathing because you miss a session. I think if you can work it into your lifestyle in a sort of balanced way, but with quite a lot of it, I personally find that kind of makes me happy in the here and now, and it sort of pays off in sort of future me is in a better position to do whatever he wants to do because he's fit and healthy.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that really motivates me is just like, I don't want to be that guy at 50 who starts trying to get in shape, because it's not that it's too late when you get to then, but like if you're already in shape at that time of your life, then it's going to be just, your quality of life is going to be so much better, and like your chances of living, like of having a healthy life in which you can continue to do all the things you would want to do will be extended as far as it possibly can be. Like, obviously there's a limit to that, but I guess that would be my motivation for it, is that I don't want to be some frail old man. Basically, I want to be Vince McMahon minus the steroids.
Yeah. I don't know how old he is, but very old, isn't he?
Yeah.
And yeah, looks like he's in good shape for it. I haven't seen him for many years. I've probably stopped watching WWE
Yeah, I
10,
mean,
15 years ago.
yeah, I'm
He was
definitely
ancient
thinking.
then.
Yeah, I'm definitely thinking what he was like then. I don't think it's what he's like now that I'm really suggesting.
Yeah. And his avatars in the video games, they were always on point as well. Like,
Oh yeah,
um,
shredded.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, there is obviously that sort of longevity, long-termist outlook that you end up developing, because the here and now, I guess, isn't enough to stay interested and to keep your skin in the game for a long time, I reckon, for most of us.
Yeah. So, what are your 5 lessons from Stoicism for better health? Because that's kind of related. Like, Stoicism is very much about thinking about, being intentional and trying to become the best version of yourself, or express the best version of yourself in whatever instance you might be. So, like, what are you taking from Stoicism that's helping you with fitness?
Well, I kind of thought that Stoicism and fitness and a sort of modern online sort of influencer-driven fitness culture of immediate results, wanting it all yesterday, trying these new steroid variants and plant steroid extracts and blah 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 to get fit in one session. Like, they're sort of at loggerheads completely, and so if you're trying to justify why you wouldn't take these new chemicals that haven't been tested for effectiveness or safety, and why instead you would take a long-term approach, I think Stoicism does offer some answers. And also, I guess it can maybe sort of help you dampen out the noise when it comes to social media, always wanting to compare yourself with others, track your progress by benchmarking against somebody who's doing all these things you're not willing to do. And I think Stoicism, in terms of sort of, you can get really into and get fixated on the controllables, and let go of what's uncontrollable. I think there's a lot of applicability there to a lot of people.
Yeah, I guess that would be really applicable in people like learning to accept where you begin, instead of being like, oh, why am I not, lifting like that guy? You look over someone like racking up like 150 kg on the squat rack, and you're like, oh, well, why am I not like that? Instead, you got to think about what you can control. So speaking of things you control, you on your channel talk about a lot of sort of a couple of supplements. You're talking about creatine, and the most interesting one, and I know we talked about this on the last one, that the audio didn't work, so sorry if we're revisiting this for you, but for other people this is brand new. You talked a lot about turkesterone and testosterone. So do you want to start by like explaining what the difference is between those two?
Yeah. Okay. So testosterone is a fat-based or cholesterol-based hormone that we find in humans and loads of other animals, and it's got a load of roles. In maintaining physique, in terms of promoting. The big one that's of interest is promoting muscle protein synthesis, and to do this, it binds to these androgen receptors, and there are other sort of variants and derivatives of testosterone that also bind the same receptors, and we've also got estrogen receptors on our muscles as well, and estrogen binds to these, obviously, and one of them, estrogen receptor B, is also in sort of lab mice rat studies shown to stimulate muscle protein synthesis, but to a lesser extent, and so testosterone stimulates muscle protein synthesis. Some other things in the body also do. Estrogen maybe to a lesser extent. Well, it seems to a lesser extent. And so it's something that we're producing naturally. It's something that lots of people are topping up with unnaturally, either because they're addressing a deficiency with, I think you've had other guests talking about testosterone deficiency sort of developing through the years. I think the epidemiology of it in the Western world is something like 1% drop off when you match for age in men every year since 1970. So we're down 50% from 1970. So testosterone deficiency is reasonably prevalent and common, and gets more common as we age. So some people are replacing just to get back up to normal physiological sort of safe ranges, and other people are replacing their testosterone or adding to already normal physiological ranges, basically to maximize muscle protein synthesis. But it's when you sort of go above normal physiological ranges that the sort of side effects and risks start to begin to outweigh the benefits and the gains. On the other side, you've got turkesterone, which is found not on the animal side of the sort of animal kingdom, but it's found in the plant kingdom and insects, wherever they fit into that. And so it helps insects sort of molt their exoskeletons. When they outgrow one skeleton, they pop out of it and then they start growing another one, a bit like crustaceans and lobsters are the famous one within that. And
getting cold.
Back in the room. And so that's what it does. And it's structurally quite similar, but much less similar in structure to testosterone than, for example, cortisol or estrogen. and neither of those are particularly aggressively anabolic. Cortisol, not at all. Estrogen seems only slightly anabolic. So
Wait, what
anyway,
do you mean by
sort
the
of
term
gym.
anabolic for people
So
like
anabolic,
me?
anabolism, growth, or pro muscle growth, essentially. So testosterone is both anabolic hormone in that it promotes muscle growth, and an androgenic hormone in that it promotes masculinizing features of humans.
Okay.
So that would be kind of its role in sort of sexual differentiation when we're growing up. So sort of development of what was essentially once female bits when we're in the uterus becoming male bits over time, and other things that sort of make men stand apart from women. So it has a small role in things like facial hair growth, but that's more one of the things it breaks down into dihydrotestosterone.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
because then DHT is like associated with male pattern baldness as well. Like,
yeah. Which yeah, I see you scratching your head. I think I've got enough hair at the moment that's not that visible with me, but it's coming for most of us. I think the prevalence is 50% of men at 50 years of age have some degree of male pattern baldness.
that's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. And what's interesting with us is it happens here and here, and then also at the back of the head here.
Yeah.
So it's pretty obvious and distinctive from other causes of baldness.
Yeah, because
Such
sometimes
as
you get
like sort
people
of,
with like just like gaps here, like right in the middle of their head, and the rest is all fine. There's just like a big
yeah,
hole in the top, like here.
yeah. Whereas female pattern baldness, which is thought to be basically the same condition but in women, also seemingly driven by DHT, they just get like diffuse generalized thinning, and so it's really hard to pick apart from, because it doesn't have that sort of distribution, that obvious distribution. So I guess in a sense we're kind of lucky because we're like, oh right, well it's going here and here and here, so let's address that sort of the DHT pathway. What can we do? Do we want to block DHT? What else can we do to get our hair back or keep it where the hairline is
Yeah.
currently?
I don't know, man. Anytime I hear people talking about that, I'm always just like, oh, I feel like I'd rather have testosterone than hair.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, so that's the thing, isn't it? Because people talk about creatine and hair loss. People talk about various other things in their association with hair loss. Basically, if you have a lot of testosterone, you've got a lot of the main or the only substrate from which you produce dihydrotestosterone. And so if you carry the genes that mean that your hair follicles are going to be sensitive to shrinking in response to DHT, over time, just as we age, not even to do with the aging and sort of getting older processes and biological processes, aging, that time is just more association for DHT in those hair follicles and more time for DHT to make the hair follicles shrink. And what happens is they don't actually disappear. They just get so sort of spindly and small that the hairs they're producing don't even break through the surface of the skin anymore. So they're all still there, but certain genes on the hair follicles mean that they respond to DHT by shrinking, whereas other hair follicles and other parts of your body, like your beard, which is thick and fluffy today, so they grow in response to, and the hair follicles get bigger over time in response to DHT. Obviously, yeah, if you don't have testosterone, then you're not going to have much DHT. You aren't going to see much hair loss. But there's some sort of nuance to it that you can block the conversion of T to DHT locally. But
Really? Like doing what?
yeah,
Or like I assume it's
also,
medication, or is it
yeah.
diet?
So there's one enzyme that converts the two, and so we've got an oral drug that we take for prostate cancer and benign prostate hyperplasia, which is non-cancerous growth of the prostate. Finasteride. Some people take that at much lower doses to stop the conversion of one to the other. But that you're still taking an oral tablet, you've still got the systemic effects. Other people just apply things directly to the scalp. And so some of those treatments, they don't actually target the hormonal basis of male pattern baldness. They just essentially make the scalp a sort of more pro-growth, pro-hair environment by stimulating sort of better development of the capillary network. So Rogaine is the really famous one that's made somebody somewhere, but lots of shareholders, lots of places, I guess, lots and lots of money.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard about like people using like rosemary oil as well, or coconut oil. I've heard sworn by, but I've never seen any evidence that that actually does anything. But
I
yeah,
have yet to see any evidence on that.
yeah,
Some interesting stuff on red light therapy or low level laser therapy, which I guess is a much less appealing name.
all
There are two
things.
devices.
Yeah, I was
There are
gonna
two
say.
FDA approved devices in the US for applying red lamps to your scalp. So they're
Well, if the FDA approved it,
reasonably,
it must be safe.
yeah,
Like,
yeah. But the trials behind it are pretty suggestive of good effects over sort of 6 months. So
interesting. There you go.
mm,
Every day's a school
yeah,
day. Um, most of the most of the stuff that I've ever read has been about blood flow. That's what they've talked about. Because I don't know, maybe as a
yeah,
doctor you have a better opinion on this than I do. But anytime I hear about like people trying to take, not necessarily like, I'll just use hair loss as the example, but you talked about like was it finasteride or something like
finasteride. Yeah, yeah.
finasteride, that that you're talking about, it blocks this enzyme that converts testosterone to DHT. And at any time I hear that from a drug or like medication as a treatment for something that's like innocuous or like not life threatening or something, I'm always just like, is that a good idea? Like, should you be fucking with your body's like system in that sense? Do you know? I'm always like, should we get involved in this? Is it just a bad idea?
I guess I know what you mean, because nobody ever died of male pattern baldness.
Mm,
The kind of second, third line, like sort of consequences, the social and the psychological impacts of like your change of self-identity or not feeling confident or not being able to confidently go out into the dating world or things like that, like they're really damaging. But actually, like, can you address those things without modifying your internal sort of hormone balances? Like, yes, like there's stuff you can do to coach people to accept who they are, even if they look a bit differently.
yeah.
Like,
Or do what Tim Pool
and we
does
can do
and
for ourselves.
yeah,
Pardon?
do what Tim Pool does and just wear a beanie. Hat. He
Yeah,
does
yeah.
what.
I think a lot of people do that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I
So
don't know if it's like part of Tim Ferriss and his headband as well.
yeah,
Like
although I think
always
Tim
wearing a
Fer
sports headband, not when he's sporting, but
that's true. I think that's more for the look than it is
mm,
for the trying to hide his very bald
yeah,
head.
yeah, yeah. He does seem to own it half the time. So yeah, you're probably right. He's probably okay with it.
Yeah. So you talked about like the difference here between testosterone and turkesterone. So I pulled up your video. So actually, exactly as you were talking about testosterone being more similar to estrogen and cortisol, was the bit that was playing in your video where you were revealing the chemical structures of all of them. So then I'm looking at the turkesterone, right? So what is it? And I know we talked about this last time, but what is it that people say? Why do people think that this is going to help them in any way, shape, or form?
Well, I guess it's social proof and kind of that parasocial relationship you form with an influencer. You kind of form this one-way relationship through the screen, and you learn to trust somebody and what they're saying, and then they come out and happen to recommend or sell a product to you, like they push it onto you, and then you kind of don't want to feel like and then you've also got the effect of survivorship bias, where the people for whom they've started taking turkesterone and they've also started doing a couple of other things, and they've maybe really like tightened up their diet and tightened up their training regime,
Hmm.
and then things go well for them and then their muscles grow, they're going to go online and shout about it from the rooftops. Those people that their favorite influencer sold them their own brand of turkesterone, they took it and nothing happened. Like, those people aren't going to be so actively sort of pushing their voice, their opinion out into the world, I don't think.
Yeah.
I think it's mostly just an example of that. Good sort of branding, like whoever came up with the name, it's ridiculously similar to testosterone in a way that those other chemicals that we've discussed aren't. in a way that the other phytoectosteroid or plant insect steroid that's been more studied than turkesterone, particularly in humans, that I referenced in that video, ectosterone, also just doesn't really sound like turkesterone, so it sort of doesn't have that appeal.
Mm.
Which is interesting because that's the one that's actually being used in the studies where they're looking for anabolic muscle growth effect in humans. They used ectosterone, not turkesterone. But
So there hasn't really been like any studies that have been like, yes, turkesterone has like shows some evidence of providing aid to muscle growth.
no, I think I'm just trying to get this right in my head because almost everything in that field is on a different plant and insect steroid. In terms of research, it's on ectosterone. I think there was one study in mice that showed that turkesterone increased rates of liver protein synthesis. That doesn't tell you what the proteins are. They're not the proteins that build up muscle. Could be one of the like myriad proteins that our livers produce. So basically, no, there isn't any solid evidence that, yeah.
It's insane when that what you said happens, that people sort of stop checking and just start to believe whatever said influencer or podcaster says. Speaking of which, today's episode is brought to you by no.
Yeah. And Voss water. Yeah,
And
you got
Voss
some
water, yeah.
high profile hydration brands on board. I like that.
I gotta say, the Voss water bottle, if anyone ever sees me drinking it and they're just like, oh my God, what a dick, he's drinking Voss water, it's because I got the bottle and I like the bottle. So rather than keeping like just buying loads of plastic bottles, I just fill up the Voss one. It's much better. It goes in the fridge, stays cold. It's great. So one of the other things you talked about on your channel a lot is creatine. So what is creatine doing within the body? Because like I had this discussion with a friend of mine the other day, and I had said that when I was training in uni, that we took creatine as a pre-workout, and then she was just like, no. You should be, if you're going to take it, you take it every day. So like, what is it, and when is it most effective, if at all?
So it's made up of amino acids, but it's not technically like on a sort of chemistry phenicity level, technically a protein. It's a quaternary ammonium compound. So it's got most of the features of a protein, but not all the features of a protein. And so made up of amino acids, it gets taken up into certain tissues by a particular transporter on the cell membranes. So only skeletal muscle, cardiac muscle, the testes, and the brain, cells of these four tissues have the correct transporter protein to take it up. So it doesn't work like, testosterone or a hormone. It doesn't have all these wide varied effects throughout the body. It just gets to those places, gets taken up into the cells, and then it does its job there. In terms of the job that it does, the process for forming energy anywhere in the body is that you take an ATP molecule, adenosine triphosphate, you strip one of the phosphates off, and you make adenosine diphosphate and this newly sort of liberated on its own phosphate ion. What creatine does is creatine's there when this is happening, just lurking in the background. It just catches that phosphate ion, sticks it back on, and reforms the ATP so you can go again. Okay. And this is called the phosphocreatine system or the phosphagen system. And essentially, like, it's this third energy system that's quicker and creates more availability of energy, but only for a shorter time than anaerobic respiration and aerobic respiration that you've been learning about in biology lessons. Like, everyone's been doing that secondary school onwards.
Yeah.
So that's what it does. In those tissues, it provides sort of short bursts of energy.
Okay. So would you recommend then, if you're going to choose to take creatine as like some sort of supplement, like is it a pre-workout or is it an everyday kind of thing?
So we know that the uptake into the muscle is mediated by insulin, which means you get more sort of bang for your buck or more for your money if you take it with a meal. Because meals are going to peak your insulin levels than if you just take it as a pre-workout with water or something like that. And the other thing that we know is the target is to basically gradually saturate your muscle cells over time. And this is a slow process, doesn't happen instantaneously when you get it in your bloodstream. So to get to that saturation point where your muscle cells have got as much creatine as they will hold, that's why people go for a daily dose. Therefore, it's not sort of, your muscles aren't sort of emptying out a little bit when you go a few days without training or you go on holiday or whatever. So that's why people recommend taking daily doses rather than taking it around training.
Hmm. Okay, that makes sense. So my friend was right, and I was being stupid
Yeah,
in
yeah,
uni.
yeah. And yeah. I mean, but one of the things that some of the research has shown is the one study that showed that once you get to this point of saturation, a normal, I can't remember what the weight was, but a normal adult male could maintain muscle saturation at just 2 grams of creatine per day. Most people would take like sort of 3 to 5 grams per day. So if you were taking 5 grams per training session and training 4 or 5 days a week, you might be all right. But it's kind of, if you make it part of your routine, if you make it regular and you're not thinking about it and it's just like there in the morning, like next to whatever you drink with your breakfast or whatever, then you don't run that risk and that unnecessary risk.
Is there like is there a point of no return, or where things become like damaging in terms of like your dosage of creatine?
So there have been some pretty long-term studies on taking, so sort of during the loading phase, they often recommend you do loading phase to get up to saturation first, and then you switch to your maintenance, which will be 3 to 5 grams. And in the loading phase, they take 15 to 20 grams for somewhere between 3 and 7 days. Basically, where the creatine goes, the fluid goes, and you can end up getting quite constipated and quite thirsty, basically. So that's relatively minor side effect. You can drink, stay well hydrated, and split your doses up to get rid of that. In terms of like long-term health and safety, I think the big thing of the video that's done best on my channel so far is that creatine increases creatinine independently of the kidneys increasing creatinine. And so it's kind of this false flag for kidney damage, because we use creatinine often to measure kidney function, because it's a cheap, readily available way of monitoring how much of something there is in the blood that isn't excreted through any other pathway. So it's not excreted in the stools, and it doesn't get broken down in the liver. The problem obviously is creatine gets broken down into creatinine. Increase the amount you're putting in the top end, it gets broken down at a steady rate of about 1 to 2% per day. You end up with more in the blood, so you get these sort of hard to read, sort of fictitious elevations in your creatinine. People worry that it's causing kidney disease. Most of the long-term studies on people with healthy kidneys, in fact, all of the long-term studies on people with healthy kidneys have shown that it doesn't cause kidney disease. But depending on what blood marker of kidney disease your hospital or your doctor's using, it can mask things like that.
Okay. So it could be then it's almost more like you might not detect other problems if you're taking a lot of
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah, if for whatever other sort of health reason you need to be concerned about your kidneys, and that's the only facility they've got in the laboratory, because there are other markers used sort of in big fancy hospitals and well-funded healthcare systems.
Yeah. Start with the NHS there, is it?
I didn't say that.
No, we wouldn't possibly criticize the NHS. They spawn such doctors as you. How
Yeah.
could we possibly blame them for this? So one of the things actually that I haven't watched yet that I've just spotted on your channel is the natural testosterone boosters and the evidence. So like what are your
Yeah.
7 natural testosterone boosters and yeah.
Uh, yeah, I don't claim ownership over any of these. So basically, since time immemorial, since way before, like, I went to medical school, studied chemistry, did any of that, decided I should have a YouTube channel. to talk about this kind of stuff.
Mhm.
People have been taking various sort of herbal products and remedies for erectile dysfunction or low libido, or to try and get bigger and stronger. And basically, there isn't a lot of good scientific evidence, sort of the higher echelons of kind of applying the scientific method for any of these. So I just sort of went through the process of doing the literature search, see what's available, and discussing sort of the outcomes of the randomized control trials that do exist.
Right. So what are the seven?
So you've probably heard of ashwagandha. That's a pretty famous one that I spoke about. There's fenugreek seed extract. So fenugreek's like obviously got that distinctive flavor, when you're eating it.
Yeah, I heard of that
Yeah,
one.
people crush up the seeds. In terms of the other ones, whether you'd have heard of them or not,
I heard of some of them.
bring it up myself.
I got it here, actually. Hang on. We got Tribulus, Maca.
Yeah, so that one. Yeah, so maca is like you can buy that in like any health food store, like along with sort of flaxseed and things like that. It kind of exists in that here's something that's kind of very dense in a lot of things. You should have it. It's might be a superfood sort of aisle.
Okay.
Tribulus is, I don't know, it just sounds really good. It sounds vaguely testosterone-ish again. So that one's been used in the fitness industry for like 30 or 40 years without ever having any solid human studies to back up its effectiveness.
Really? Like none?
Literally zero studies in humans that show that it's effective versus a placebo.
Wow. So then we got Asian ginseng, which I have heard of. And holy shit, I'm totally gonna.
It's hard to keep up. It seems like everyone's got their own ginseng these days.
Fadogia agrestis.
Yeah, see, that's another one, isn't it? Like, agrestis. What does that like kind of imply in your mind? Like, this is one that's kind of really boomed recently and gained a lot of attention without much by way of human evidence. So they did, I think it should be linked in the video description. They did a study on rats in 2005, and it showed some positive effect on testosterone then in rats. Nothing in the 17 years since in human studies.
Oh, what a title of that study. Hang on, sorry, I have to read this out. Aphrodisiac potentials of the aqueous extract of Fadogia agrestis stem in male albino rats. Wow, that is
yeah. For anyone out there that's listening that is a male albino rat, this is the product for you.
Yeah.
But for those of us who isn't, I assume most of your sort of viewership and audience, Josh, is male albino rats. Am I right?
I mean, I can confirm that most of them are mammalian. Beyond that, I don't know. There's probably a few lizard people listening. Keep tabs on me.
But YouTube wouldn't give you the analytics on that.
It's the problem is that the normally when they're buying devices, they're registered to like humans instead of lizard people. It's kind of discriminatory of YouTube. I'm sure there'll be a lawsuit at some point soon.
Yeah, quite right.
And then, so the last one was forskolin. Is that how you pronounce that?
I mean,
forskolin.
Good question. Good question. I've only read articles on it.
That's fair.
Yeah, I don't know how you pronounce forskolin, but yeah, I guess
that's so weird. Like honestly, right? So I've heard of I've heard of fenugreek and Asian ginseng discussed in this sort of area, right? But from my understanding, these like tiny little supplements are not the thing that's gonna like boost your testosterone. There's got to be like a diet why like you can't just sit and eat crap and then just take your little shot of like fenugreek or tribulus or Fadogia agrestis and then be like suddenly like pumped full of testosterone and like punching through walls. Like my understanding was like in order to actually boost your testosterone naturally, it had to be like a diet wide thing. So like the things that I've heard is like things high in like saturated fats, nuts, especially almonds, eggs, Brazil nuts, and then like grass-fed beef as much as possible. Like these are the things that I have personally heard. Like, is that accurate, or am I also, falling victim to junk science?
So again, not loads of human science out there, but we know that testosterone being made from cholesterol, if you're deficient in cholesterol, you can't have enough testosterone. You can't build something out of nothing. There's one systematic review ever on low fat diets and their effect on testosterone in humans. And it did conclude that there is some evidence that low fat diets reduce testosterone levels in humans. It only had just over 200 participants across all of the 7 studies it looked at. So that's kind of the flimsy sort of foundations on which we're trying to build sort of arguments and draw conclusions. So like hopefully there'll be more stuff coming out, but yeah, low fat diets, extremely low fat diets, bad for testosterone because you don't have enough of the substrate with which we make testosterone. The other end of the spectrum, hypercholesterolemia, or having lots and lots of cholesterol in the blood, again similarly thin spread of evidence, in fact less evidence, but the studies that do exist suggest that if you have too much fat in the blood, that again can reduce your testosterone levels. I guess the question is that like a sort of direct effect, or is it that people that have too much fat in their blood tend to run at sort of calorie surplus most of the time, tend to be overweight? I don't know what you do if you sort of had a BMI matched sort of study on that, what your findings might be. So making sure you get enough of those stuff and making sure you're not deficient in the substrates with which we build the hormones we want to have, and also the vitamins that are involved in the process of converting cholesterol to testosterone, super important. For that reason, that's why zinc, ZMA, or zinc, magnesium supplements, I can't remember what the A is for. I think the A is much lesser in terms of the importance of testosterone synthesis, but zinc and magnesium both play a part. Vitamin D also, and that's something that for us, like being so far from the equator and winter being so dark, and sort of leave for work, it's dark, come home from work, it's dark, you can end up with seasonal deficiencies in vitamin D quite easily. So yeah, as well as making sure you've got enough fat to have some substrate from which to build testosterone, substrate just being silly jargon for building block. You need to have the building blocks to build it, and you need to have the tools with which cholesterol is cleaved into testosterone. And zinc, magnesium, vitamin D all help in that process.
You reminded me of a website
called... Of a website?
Yeah, it's called What the Fuck Happened in 1971.com. Just after you mentioned how testosterone had been dropping off, I was like, I wonder if this is mentioned in this website. Okay, can you see this?
Yeah.
Okay, is it the right way round for you? It's not flipped, is it?
Yeah.
Okay,
so all trending.
So it goes through like productivity versus compensation, real wages separated from GDP, income gains going to the top 95th percentile, income growth, decline in wages, like in real terms. It just goes on and on and on and on. It's like, what the fuck happened in 1971?
And does it draw conclusions or sort of give you the historical context, or is it just
it's
really
it's just saying what the fuck happened in 1971? I mean, there's 2 major arguments that I know are made about it. So the cumulative inflation, but it keeps going. Like, okay, it's not just like food prices. It's like house prices, it's gold prices, but then it goes beyond that. Then it goes down. If you go further down, we've got national debt, surplus versus GDP. But then the further you go down, then it goes into other like less, like literally like financially joined things. So like energy consumption per capita drops, like instead of going up and up like you'd expect, it drops off. Energy and real GDP per capita over G7 drops off a cliff. Energy consumption per capita off a cliff. There's this sudden like weird like flip in people's ideology in extremism. Like everything that had been trending towards more centrism suddenly is like going the other way. Political speeches suddenly started to become less complex and more like simple and like emotion based. Bureaucracy, i.e. number of pages in the Federal Register, like basically the amount of bureaucracy. It's so weird. Like the number of lawyers per physics PhDs, number of people incarcerated. It just goes on and on and on and on and on and on. Physicians, like cost of healthcare prices, production of vegetable oil, meat consumption randomly, chicken just goes through the roof, beef inventory, like number of cows going down, like it's really weird. And I don't know exactly what to make of it. The arguments that I've heard made for it are basically someone said that that's when the US came off the gold standard. So
I'm getting a strange double face thing going on here on the screen. I don't know if you've got two of me as well. Quite curious.
Yes, apologies.
No worries.
There we go. That should be it, Ryan.
Yeah, so the US came off the gold standard in sort of indexing the dollar to the what gold's worth. Okay.
To reality, basically. But I don't know if that explains all the other stuff, because like there's a physicist that claims it's all about people failing to that, like we that's when we stopped investing in science and how that like everything flipped, that the economy suddenly started to be geared towards the financial system rather than everything else, and that's when things really started to get bad, basically, because everything became financialized and all of the best physicists of our generation are currently working at Goldman Sachs in the risk department and doing an awful job. But like, yeah, so like that's the argument that he makes. And then when you mentioned the testosterone thing, I was like, well, that's one more for the fucking list.
Yeah, add it to the graph. Yeah.
It's weird though that all of
they
these
actually
things...
don't have it on there. They are missing one.
I should email them. Do they have an email address?
You should.
Support our research. I reckon I can email them. But yeah, I mean, that doesn't really explain the drop off in testosterone, or maybe it does.
There's a physical solution out there that the best physicists in the world aren't working on right now.
Maybe. I mean, it's probably the point at which there was like it was like the beginning of a lot of the problems that we have today were all around that time, because you started to get, so post-war you had like the rebuilding period, then you had like the boom golden years like the 60s 70s, and then once everyone had started to like open up, you know, GDP was like exploding, then the people at the top then suddenly begin to amass way more money and power, and then that sort of prevents the free innovation and like creative destruction that might have otherwise like derailed perhaps some of these issues, and instead like a lot of these companies became like entrenched monopolies and rent seekers. So that might be the reason, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know enough about sort of American and global economic history to sort of wager a single sort of idea or thought in this sphere.
Yeah, that's fair.
I have no clue.
I mean, I don't know that much. I've just had the privilege of talking to quite a lot of people who do, and reading their books. Anyway, back to things that you're more well versed in.
I would sort of challenge you to find something I am less well versed in than 1970s macroeconomics. Like, I'm pretty much nothing.
I reckon I could do. What about you know, the DMT realm? Do you know less about that, and about, you know, military experiments attempting to communicate and map the DMT realm? I bet you know less about that.
Yeah, I would go with I know less about that. Yeah. He's done it. Back of the net.
home run.
Is that your third drinks sort of brand
Receptacle.
activity or brand association, whatever you call it?
Yeah, I mean it's a Dale Farm thermo flask thing, and then I have a How You Doing mug, and my protein and the Voss. I have many liquids required to keep me talking. No coffee today, though. I'm trying to not have as much caffeine. It's probably not that good for me at the doses that I'm consuming it in.
Okay.
But thinking of things that people shouldn't be cutting back on, I wanted to ask you about this because I was talking to someone about this the other day. We were talking about this weight loss drug that like half of fucking the celebs are using in America. Ozempic. Have you heard of this?
Yeah. So is Ozempic? I think Ozempic is the brand name for people who are taking this to manage their diabetes, aren't they? And then Wegovy is the other brand name for the same drug for those that are just looking to lose weight. Yeah, I've heard bits about it. Obviously, I think it's a much bigger thing over in the States at the moment. In the UK, they're talking about, I think, umming and ahhing. Have the NHS recently made a commitment to buy some Wegovy? I think they have, but it's relatively nascent over here, I think, isn't it, compared to over in the States?
Yeah, to be fair, we're just so much less medicated. It's really weird.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
I hear this. Semaglutide is being proposed potentially to be given as a weight loss drug on the NHS. Holy shit, that's a bad idea.
Yeah, I mean, it depends who you ask, doesn't it? Because I think, when the NHS was founded, it was about sort of helping you to avoid sort of sudden, obvious causes of death at points at which you don't need to die. And what the role of the NHS is now no longer, reflects that initial vision, does it?
Well, no, not really. But
in terms of
I was just thinking in terms of like, because I don't know if you've seen the stories. Like, there's stories about this this girl, this TikTok influencer who was using it to lose weight, and then it's like, because it's an appetite suppressant, right? But the problem is that it's not doing nothing to your metabolism. So that when you then stop taking it, you're all of a sudden like ravenously hungry and you start to pile the weight back on. So it's either you take it forever or you may initially lose weight, but then like this TikTok person was just like, yeah, I can't remember what their name is. I'm not on TikTok. Someone was just showing me the video on YouTube. I am that old. But they were, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole of just get like I see why people like it, and I understand it too much and to actually do it to myself, because I know it would just cost too much of my time.
From an outsider perspective, it's easy to look at it and be like, right, do I need like this constant stream of things that add no sort of long-term benefit? They don't educate me, they don't tell me anything I didn't know, they just show me things that are instantly just easy on the eyes, basically. Yeah, do you need that?
Yeah, and like also like sometimes when I see like YouTube shorts and like or Twitter is doing it as well now, we have these like 1-2 minute videos and you flip. I'm like, what? Once I've heard a minute of something and I'm interested, I want to hear the rest. I don't want to hear the 1 minute. Do you know what I mean? I want the long form thing, which is still why I just listen to like Rogan and Lex Friedman, basically, because they're the best long form things that I've come across. But yeah, so I was just like, I was looking at this, and this person is they were like, yeah, I'm putting way more weight back on, like way more. And I was like, holy shit! Like, and the NHS is considering giving this to people. Like, isn't this just gonna make the problem worse? Like,
that's a lifelong financial obligation, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. And then I mean, really, shouldn't we be like giving it to the people with diabetes?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's a fixed sort of constrained mindset. Like,
well,
if the profits flow, which they will, the pharmaceutical company will like increase their production of the chemicals. Like they're going to pump out a lot of semaglutide. So I guess locally, like on certain levels, there might be local distribution issues. But if it's super profitable, like Novo Nordisk or whoever it is that owns the patent are going to make enough for everyone that's diabetic and everyone that's obese, or everyone that's slightly fatter than they want to be, is I guess the more concerning case and usage, isn't it? There's just anyone that maybe doesn't like how they look when they look down, is going to end up on Wegovy, and then we're going to get to this sort of paradigm of not only is everyone touched up in all the photos online, everyone is also touched up all the time in reality by taking these drugs that artificially slow the emptying of the stomach and therefore make you feel fuller, therefore you eat less. So suddenly, like, if you're that weirdo that's on the outside and not taking this thing that makes you eat less, like, you're going to end up feeling like, I don't know, a balloon or a blimp next to all these people because everyone else is taking Wegovy. And it's like, yeah, there'll be a lot of social pressure. It could end up being a lot of social pressure to be on it.
Yeah. It says it can cause inflammation of the pancreas, vision problems, hypoglycemia, kidney failure, serious allergic reactions, and gallbladder problems. Although the most common side effects include nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, stomach pain, and constipation. Just go for a run.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is, people wanting a solution rather than, wanting to enact change to prevent it happening. And, how do you encourage people to take preventative, proactive steps to do things? Like it's not a $1 million question, because actually the funding and the sort of reward system for pharmaceutical companies actually funds developing a problem and then creating a solution to it, rather than don't develop a problem. But yeah, how you change behaviors so that people basically take a higher agency view of the world, in which, like, they can control what they're doing in terms of, feel like they can control their inputs and outputs in terms of exercise, and how do you promote that agency that they shouldn't be looking necessarily to, unless maybe you've completely emptied the barrel and other things, or have, there's always kind of certain medical conditions people can bring up where they're like, well, actually in this case this person needs it. But like, for most of us, most of the time, like, there are choices we can be making each and every day to stop us gradually accumulating weight and ending up overweight or obese, aren't there? So how do we empower people to make more of those good choices, basically, rather than pushing a drug on them once the manifestation of the bad choices has already come about?
Yeah, it really is. Although to be honest, I look at people and I'm like, how did you end up like that? Like right now, I've kind of tweaked my shoulder, right? So I haven't been to the gym in about 3.5, 4 weeks. And I'm already like, you're getting fat. You're getting fat. You're getting fat. And like, I don't understand how people get like, and realistically, I weigh less because I've lost muscle mass. But I'm still like, you're getting fat, Josh. I don't understand how people get to that point, where they're looking down and they can't see their toes. I'm like, how did you not stop before this?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you've got, like, that privilege and like arrogance of someone who's never been overweight, that for whom it's easy for me to talk about it as well, to like in the hypothetical sense of, like, someone with your cognition and your thought patterns. For you, it's like unthinkable. For me, it's also unthinkable, because I would be sort of having similar messages, and I would be doing what I can to restrict eating if I suffered an injury, and therefore kept eating at the same rate that I currently do to sustain being able to exercise quite often. But I think there are like, problematic behaviors associated with, maybe some people are experiencing the same thoughts, but I'm getting fat. Their response to that is to seek comfort in the refrigerator. Yeah, exactly. So, what can you do about that? Is there, do you just sort of replace one sort of vice or crutch with another, something that is low or zero calories? Is that one of the ways? Yeah, it's like one of the challenges of our times. It's perhaps not as sort of sexy as landing somebody on Mars or something, but the world getting fatter and fatter progressively is a really interesting, fascinating challenge. It's at loggerheads with this talk about longevity is all the rage these days.
Yeah.
And yeah, we might be witnessing now or now-ish life expectancy declining for the first time since the Industrial
Yeah, no,
Revolution.
it definitely did in America, right? Last year.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
So that's
I don't know about
new
the
and
UK.
profoundly different, and it's just not following the trends that we were expecting things to kind of take off and hopefully sort of reach some sort of point where things really start accelerating
Yeah. Well,
with longevity, escape velocity, and all that. But
yeah. Well, the sugar industry really did a fucking number on us, because that's one of the things that's probably causing a lot of the obesity is like sugars and um what do you call it? Why am I losing the word now? The high fructose corn syrups, things like that are just
yeah. So we've
horrendous.
got
And they're the things that are probably like limiting the longevity as well. Because anytime I ever listen to anything about life expectancy or things, it's just like the like headline things are like sleep and
mm,
sugar, or well, not
yeah,
eating
yeah,
sugar, not eating refined sugars, which is
yeah.
yeah,
Well, I guess I guess that part of it is just this you look at kind of evolutionary biology, and it wasn't that long ago, 200-300 years ago, and then obviously more start sort of the further back in time you go, where basically a good metabolism back then was you could latch onto and hold onto and store any energy that was available to you, because we lived in a time where food scarcity was a lot more common than food abundance. And there are these things on the evolutionary biologists talk about sensory specific sensory specific satiety, where if you have a particular sort of flavor and texture, you reach a point of boredom or fullness when you take it in. But then if you get offered something else, you can go for that and you can enjoy it. And so back in ye olde days, before industrialized agriculture, this was, if you've got a scarcity of something and you've run out of it, you want to find something else that you can eat. So it was a advantage back in food scarcity to be able to do this. Nowadays, when we've got this food surplus in the West, in industrialized countries, it's a disadvantage, because it means you can smash a load of French fries, 3 hot dogs, but then sensory specific satiety means actually you've still got room for an ice cream, and maybe like a thick shake as well, because these are all different sensory experiences that we can make room for, even though we don't actually have more physical space inside of us, but we can keep sort of adding different things to it. So I think it's really interesting, and yeah, these things that used to be beneficial to us, and in terms of genetic sort of evolutionary time scale, things haven't changed that much. But in terms of culture, society, food availability, now that thing that used to be beneficial and used to confer survival, reproductivity benefit means, when you go to the buffet, you're going to smash 6 plates, even if the first plate you eat is like what would normally be fine for dinner for you, because you've got all these other experiences. Like it's crazy.
I'm just thinking Heike in Innsbruck.
Oh yeah, I
It
don't know if that place is still open, but it's so
is. It
good. And
is. I
also,
walked past it like
we
last
ate
month.
so much food there. Yeah, nice, nice. Yeah, same thing. And at least that had the moderator of, you would pick out the food, they would then cook it for you, and hopefully some of those satiety signals are like happening in the interim, and that slows down your portion sizes. And their plates weren't that massive either, but
No,
like
that's true. Although
some
we
of the
did.
buffets you go to, like
I was going to say that seemed like a serious disadvantage at the times, but maybe maybe not.
yeah, 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 exactly. But it's serving us a benefit in the long run, I think. Yeah, definitely. Over processing and creating these foods that have these things, chemicals, food substances, substrates, whatever you want to call it, that we've never experienced. And not only have we not evolved to process it and use it in a way that is pro health, neither has our gut microbiome, which has been following us around and being passed down generation to generation. Um, that's not used to this stuff, and that's being reshaped by what we eat. And it's also failing to process this new stuff that it doesn't have the genes to produce the enzymes to break down.
Mm. Wow, I have learned a lot in the last 10 minutes. I didn't know there was an evolutionary reason for that. So that is very cool. Because I always used to argue with my mom, is like, look, it's two different stomachs. If I can't finish the broccoli, I can
Yeah.
still have the ice cream.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
now
yeah.
I know that there was an
And what you
evolutionary
should,
reason.
yeah, if you'd have said it's biology, bitch. No, don't say that.
I'm
Not
sure,
to your mum, not to
I'm
anyone's
sure
mum,
my mom would have
not
taken
to
that
anyone's mother,
very
not to
well.
anyone's daughter.
Oh,
She doesn't listen to this, does she?
no, of course not. Anyway, unfortunately, as fun as this is, I'm gonna have to run as I have to go and meet
Yes,
some
yeah,
friends
yeah,
for
because you're putting on
food.
so much weight.
Yeah, I gotta go. Well, no, I'm gonna take my new
Yeah.
bike out for a ride. That's exciting.
So fun. That is
And it's getting
exciting.
a little
Yeah.
dark, so the new light as well, probably.
Mm.
Anyway, Owen, it's been a pleasure. Everyone, check out Dr. Owen. I'll link it in the description. I've shown you some videos while we've been talking. Is there anything else you want to plug, or just your YouTube channel?
No, that's more than enough. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me, Josh.
No problem, man. Hey, everyone. Thanks for making it right the way to the end of the podcast. I love that you tuned in this long. Do me a favor, hit subscribe, because 80% of you bastards are not subscribing, but you're watching my videos. See you next time.